Today, we're diving into a wild and dramatic moment in international politics, the Trump administration's Oval Office ambush of South African President Cyril Ramaphosa. This wasn't just a meeting gone wrong. It was a geopolitical clash that exposed deep tensions, misinformation, and the high stakes of U.S. South Africa relations. Buckle up, because we're going to unpack every detail of this extraordinary encounter, its context, and its far-reaching repercussions. Let's get started. It all began with what was supposed to be a standard diplomatic meeting in the Oval Office. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa sat down with U.S. President Donald Trump, expecting to discuss trade, investment, and maybe even a little golf. They started with some lighthearted banter about it. But things took a sharp turn. Out of nowhere, Trump launched into a tense confrontation, accusing South Africa of a so-called white genocide. Yes, you heard that right. Influenced by far-right conspiracy narratives, Trump claimed white farmers in South Africa were facing systematic persecution, land seizures, and even genocide. In a move straight out of a movie, Trump dimmed the Oval Office lights and played a video montage that he said showed evidence of anti-white violence in South Africa. He didn't stop there. He pulled out printed news articles about murdered white farmers, flipping through the pages, repeating death, death, and then thrusting the clippings at a stunned Ramaphosa. Trump insisted, "We have thousands of stories and documentaries about this supposed racial genocide," demanding that Ramaphosa respond to it. This wasn't diplomacy, it was a stunt. Observers called it an extraordinary Oval Office meeting and a hectoring stunt. One South African newspaper put it bluntly, "All in all, it was awful, but it could have been worse." Across African media, this was labeled an outright ambush. Now imagine being Cyril Ramaphosa in that moment, caught completely off guard. But he handled it like a pro. Despite the provocation, Ramaphosa stayed calm and pushed back firmly. When Trump went on about an alleged campaign to murder white farmers, Ramaphosa shut it down, saying, "There is just no genocide in South Africa." He pointed out that crime affects all communities in his country, not just white farmers. In fact, he made a sharp point. If Afrikaner farmers were really being exterminated, wealthy white South Africans like business mogul Johan Rupert or golf champions Ernie Els and Retief Goosen, who were part of the visiting delegation, wouldn't be sitting there, alive and thriving. Ramaphosa went further. Putting the facts in context, he explained that while South Africa struggles with violent crime, the overwhelming majority of murder victims are black, not white. He also clarified that a new land reform law allows limited land expropriation to address apartheid-era injustices, but no such expropriation has taken place, and vast land inequalities still persist. Even as Trump interrupted, snapping, "The farmers are not black," Ramaphosa kept his cool. He offered dialogue, saying, "These are concerns we are willing to talk to you about," and even invoked Nelson Mandela's legacy as a peacemaker. Trump wasn't swayed, but Ramaphosa refused to take the bait for a shouting match. He suggested, "Let's talk about it very calmly." South African commentators praised him for staying courteous and reconciliatory in the face of an exercised Trump. One local journalist even quipped that Ramaphosa deserved a stiff drink after that ordeal. Behind closed doors, once the cameras were off, Ramaphosa tried to salvage the visit. Over a working lunch, he shifted the conversation to trade and investment, presenting proposals on critical minerals and energy cooperation. He later told reporters that things had gone well at the lunch and even hinted that Trump might attend an upcoming G20 summit in South Africa. But let's be real, the public spectacle from the morning stole the headlines. South Africa's media and diplomatic circles were shocked and angry at Trump's treatment of their president, though relieved that Ramaphosa's steady handling prevented an outright diplomatic calamity. This Oval Office drama didn't happen in isolation. It came against a backdrop of intense U.S. economic pressure on South Africa during Trump's administration. Under his America First trade policies, South Africa was hit with hefty tariffs. Back in 2018, Trump slapped global tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminum, which hurt South African metal exporters. These tariffs threatened jobs in South Africa's metals manufacturing and mining sectors, especially with the country's already high unemployment rate. While South Africa secured some exemptions, the pressure didn't stop there. By Trump's second term in 2025, things got even tougher. The U.S. signaled plans for a sweeping 30% tariff on all South African goods, a move that alarmed businesses, especially in sectors like automotive manufacturing that rely on U.S. exports. Trump also showed little interest in renewing the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, a trade pact that's been a lifeline for South Africa's economy by granting duty-free access for many exports. Losing AGOA was a huge concern, and Ramaphosa's visit to Washington was a desperate bid to reset relations and negotiate tariff relief or a new trade deal to boost South Africa's struggling economy, where unemployment sits at 30%. But trade wasn't the only issue. Trump's administration took the unprecedented step of cutting off major development aid, including funds for PEPFAR, the U.S.'s HIV/AIDS relief program that provided $460 million to South Africa in 2023 alone. This aid frees kind-eyed, life-saving programs in a country with one of the world's worst HIV epidemics. On top of that, Trump issued an executive order offering fast-track asylum to white South African farmers, casting them as victims of persecution under land reform policies. This was seen in Pretoria as racially charged interference, practically inviting white South Africans to abandon their country. Tens of thousands reportedly expressed interest in U.S. visas, while South African officials slammed the move for echoing past U.S. policies that favored the defunct apartheid regime. Another huge point of tension was South Africa's bold move to challenge the U.S. and its allies on the global stage. In late 2023, South Africa led a case at the International Court of Justice, accusing Israel, a close U.S. ally, of genocide against Palestinians in Gaza. This followed the Israel-Gaza war, sparked by Hamas's October 7, 2023 attack. Outraged by the high Palestinian civilian death toll, South Africa filed under the Genocide Convention, pointing to tens of thousands killed, and inflammatory rhetoric by some Israeli leaders as evidence of genocidal intent. The ICJ ordered Israel to take measures to prevent genocide while the case proceeds, though Israel called the allegations baseless. The U.S. strongly opposed South Africa's move, seeing it as a provocative affront. From Washington's perspective, Pretoria's ICJ gambit crossed a red line. It wasn't just about Israel. South Africa's broader alignment with Global South positions, like refusing to join Western sanctions against Russia over Ukraine, was a sore point. The ICJ case, though, was especially explosive. It signaled a sharp break with the U.S. on a core issue, challenging Washington in a court of global opinion. Other nations like Namibia and Bangladesh joined South Africa's complaint, highlighting a wider rift between the West and the developing world. The U.S. made its displeasure clear. South Africa's ambassador in Washington was criticized for defending the case, and even expelled after accusing the U.S. of harboring a white victimhood mentality in its Africa policy. This diplomatic flashpoint set the stage for the tense Ramaphosa-Trump meeting. The Oval Office incident also reflected Trump's broader approach to Africa, one often steeped in racialized narratives and transactional diplomacy. His focus on white South African farmers wasn't just a talking point, it was rooted in a fringe, white genocide myth popular among white nationalist groups. Trump had tweeted about this back in 2018 after a Fox News segment, and his base, which includes white nationalist elements, ate it up. His decision to offer asylum to white farmers while barring refugees from war-torn African and Middle Eastern countries screamed racial bias. As one U.S. analyst put it, it's impossible not to see the race dynamics at play. There's an actual genocide in Sudan, yet the U.S. wasn't rushing to help Sudanese refugees, just white South Africans. Trump's Africa policy was also ruthlessly transactional. He showed little interest in the continent unless it involved countering rivals like China or striking deals that benefited the U.S. When African nations didn't align with U.S. policies, like South Africa's stances on Russia or Israel, Trump hit back with tariffs, aid cuts, and diplomatic expulsions. His disdain for Africa was clear in his first term, when he reportedly called African countries shithole countries in 2018, sparking outrage across the continent. The African Union called it blatantly racist. Trump's approach, prioritizing domestic political messaging and zero-sum deals over traditional diplomacy, left U.S. Africa relations in tatters. A 2025 Carnegie Endowment report warned that the U.S. South Africa partnership was on the brink of collapse due to geopolitical tensions, ideological differences, and controversial policy decisions. This brings us to China's growing influence in Africa and South Africa's role in the BRICS bloc. China has been Africa's largest trading partner since 2009, with trade hitting nearly $200 billion by 2012, double that of the U.S.-China's investments in infrastructure, mining, and telecoms, plus its no-strings loans, appeal to African leaders tired of Western conditions. As Trump's America First policies pulled the U.S. back, China filled the gap, offering 5G tech and Belt and Road projects. The U.S. grew suspicious of South Africa's close ties with China, even complaining about things like Chinese pilots training on South African soil. South Africa under Ramaphosa has leaned into BRICS, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as a platform to amplify the global South. BRICS has been pushing to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar, with talks of a common currency or trading in local currencies like the yuan. This de-dollarization threatens a core pillar of U.S. global power, and Washington isn't happy. Trump's team saw BRICS as an anti-Western bloc, and the Oval Office ambush, while focused on white farmers, was really about deeper strategic rifts. South Africa's ICJ case and ties with China and Russia were the real crux of the strained relationship. Trump's aggressive tactics, tariffs, ultimatums, and public berating likely pushed South Africa closer to BRICS, reinforcing Pretoria's resolve to seek partners who respect its sovereignty. Across Africa, the fallout from this incident was huge. South African media called it the Oval Office ambush, slamming Trump's disrespectful behavior and praising Ramaphosa's dignified response. Some wished he'd pushed back harder. One commentator said, "Who among us did not secretly yearn to see Ramaphosa fight back a little more?" But most agreed he had no choice but to stay tactful, given the stakes. His delegation, including trade union leader Zingiswa Losi and Johan Rupert, backed him up, emphasizing that crime in South Africa affects all races. Losi pointed out that black women often face the worst violence, and Rupert compared South African crime to 1970s New York to relate to Trump. This delegation of all the talents became a source of national pride. African diplomatic circles saw the episode as part of Trump's arrogance toward the continent. The African Union, already fed up with Trump's insults, offered quiet solidarity with Ramaphosa. Some argued Africa should pivot to partners like China or the EU, who offer more respect. There was also concern that Trump's racial narratives could fuel division, with Zimbabwean and Namibian media warning about white victimhood tropes being weaponized to undermine African governments. The incident became a rallying cry in Pan-African forums for unity and self-respect when dealing with global powers. So, what does this all mean? The Trump-Ramaphosa clash of May 2025 was a collision of narratives and worldviews. Trump's ambush, pushing a debunked white genocide myth, embarrassed an African leader and showed how he mixed domestic politics with foreign policy. Ramaphosa's calm, fact-based response averted a total disaster, but the humiliation highlighted how strained U.S. South Africa ties had become. Behind the drama lie real divides. U.S. tariffs and aid cuts are squeezing South Africa's economy, while Pretoria's ICJ case and BRICS alignment signal a push for a multipolar world. Both sides face a diplomatic crossroads. There's still reason to cooperate, trade, health, security, but trust is in short supply. Ramaphosa's poise bolstered his domestic standing, reminding South Africans of Mandela's values: patience, dialogue, and truth. For Trump, the ambush was a signal to his base and to Pretoria that the old rules are gone. This dramatic moment will shape U.S.-Africa relations and Africa's unity for years to come.